Welcome back to another episode of this whole YouTube thing. I apologize about no video on Monday. I know I said Monday and Wednesdays, but it was the Easter thing. We were kind of off, and I was enjoying my time off, much like you guys were. Basically just bunkering down because of all the snow that we were supposed to get, and then we sort of got, kind of didn't get. I don't know. So anyway, here we are. This is going to be the one episode for the week. I am going to start something I've been wanting to do for a while, which was actually when I was thinking about this whole YouTube thing, was kind of at the heart a little bit of the inspiration for it all. And that is to do some science, go figure, and kind of show you guys some simple things that you can do at home that are representative of some of the things that are happening out in the world, and then kind of explain the science behind it. So for the very first one we're going to do, we're going to take this jar, which is just an empty jar, and we're going to create some clouds. And we're going to create clouds inside of this jar, and you'll be able to see the clouds form right before your eyes. And then you can take the lid off of the jar, and the clouds will whisk themselves out of the jar. And right now I'm inside of a room, obviously, in my house, so they're not going to float around the room and look like a cloud does outside, but the formation of the clouds in here are basically identical to what's happening to the clouds out there and how clouds out there form. And so we're going to make a cloud in a jar. So I will kind of explain to you the ingredients or supplies that you need in order to do this, and then we'll walk through it. And as we go, I'll kind of explain the science behind what's happening, and hopefully that will give you a better explanation of why clouds form out there the way that they do. Alrighty, so I'm going to quickly run through here the supplies that you need if you wanted to do this yourself, which it's pretty simple, and I think it's actually pretty cool. So you just need a jar, like I said. This one happens to be a mason jar, but it would not need to be a mason jar. It could be any sort of jar. And then you also need a lid for it. It doesn't need to screw on, because I will show you that we're actually going to be putting the lid on upside down like so. So it doesn't need to have a lid that screws, but it does need to have a lid that can go across the top of it. So that's the first thing you need. The second thing you need is some ice. I have these fancy giant ice cubes, so we'll be using one of these, but you can just use regular ice as well if you don't have cubes that are quite this large. You need hot water. So this is a hot water kettle. You can certainly just like boil some water on the stove. If you can get your tap water to get really hot without having to boil it, that would also work. Obviously, I have a problem with coffee, and I use this hot water kettle to heat up my hot water for my coffee every morning, and also maybe in the afternoons and sometimes in the evenings too, but I don't have a problem, I swear. And then finally, you need air freshener or hairspray. Clearly, as you guys saw, I don't really have much hair, so I do not have hairspray just sitting around. And obviously, due to the lockdown and everything, I'm not just going to run to the grocery store or Walmart or something to get hairspray. So I'm just using air freshener that I had. So our cloud will also smell nice. In fact, my cloud's going to smell like Hawaii, which at a time like this sounds pretty darn nice. So those are the four things you need. You need your jar, you need your ice cubes, you need your hot water, and then you need your air freshener or hairspray. Alrighty, so we're going to make our cloud. So what you need to do is you need to take your jar, and again, doesn't matter what kind of jar it is. You need the lid, but you don't need the lid yet. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to take our jar and we're going to fill it up just a little bit with some hot water. It doesn't need to be very full. I've got, about that much in. And we need to swirl this gently. We want to warm up the jar a little bit. And so swirl it up maybe 5-10 seconds or so. And then we're going to take our lid, and remember, we're not putting it on this way. We're putting it on upside down. And then we're going to take an ice cube, which I've got those huge ones, remember, and I'm just going to set that on top of the lid. And we are just setting that on top of the jar, so kind of looks like so. And as we let this sit, you're going to let that sit for maybe 30 seconds or so. Let's talk quickly the science behind what's going on. So the jar is representing the gases that we have outside in the atmosphere. So the gas in an empty jar is like the same combination as you have outside. So if a cloud's going to form outside in the sky in the atmosphere, it'll form in a jar because it's the same makeup of gases. And one of the things that we're adding is we're adding hot water. And we're not adding hot water necessarily because of the water specifically. We're adding it for the temperature. But in addition, there is water vapor in the jar because there's water vapor in the air around you. So we add this hot water, and when we add the hot water, the air inside of the jar starts to warm up. And if gas warms up, it does one thing, and the one thing it does is it starts to rise. So the water vapor inside of the jar starts to rise. And as it rises up out of this jar, if I didn't have a lid on, it would just escape and it would go up towards the ceiling in the room I'm in. But it does stop because it hits the lid, right? If we didn't have the ice on the lid, it would hit that lid and just kind of hover near the top of that lid because it's really warm. But you'll notice that we introduced the lid, and when we put the ice cube on the lid, what we're doing is we're cooling down the lid temperature. And so what happens is the water vapor rises up in the jar, it hits the lid, and it starts to sink because something that cools down sinks. And it begins this cycle, right? It plummets back down towards the bottom of the jar, and lo and behold, what's at the bottom of the jar but more hot water? So that heats that water vapor back up, and it starts rising up to the lid, and then it sinks down, and then it rises up and sinks, and it goes back and forth, and it continues this cycle over and over and over again. That in and of itself doesn't make a cloud. What makes a cloud is the water vapor. When it cools down, we call that condensing. And when something condenses, it can turn into more of a visible type appearance. And a cloud is just condensed water vapor. But water vapor can't condense on nothing. It can't condense on gas. It has to condense on some little particle, either dust, debris that's floating around in the air. Believe it or not, there's small enough things that can float around in the air. So any of those things, dust, debris, little particles, water vapor can cling to and condense to and form a cloud. That's what a cloud is. It's a water vapor that's condensed onto things. So what we need to do is introduce our final ingredient, which is, in this case, is the air freshener. So all you're gonna do is you're gonna take the lid, and I'll try to do this with one hand. We're gonna take the lid off. We're just gonna take our hairspray or air freshener. We're gonna give one squirt in there, and we're gonna close it back up. And you won't really be able to see much right now. You can see inside of the jar is a little hazy because of condensation on the sides of the glass. But when we go to remove this to release our cloud, you should be able to see it better. So currently, inside of here, we do have a cloud. And again, you can't really see it. We'll see if we can move this camera enough so that you can see the very top of this. Okay, so what's going to happen is when I take this lid off, you should be able to see the cloud escape out of this jar because we have successfully, hopefully, created a cloud. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this and we'll see if it worked. I don't know if you caught it. It was escaping. I'm thinking we might have waited a little too long, and I don't know if our water was quite hot enough. So we're gonna give it round 2 and see if we can create a darker, even better cloud. All right, we are on to take 2. I just added the hot water. I'm just giving it a swirl here. We will add our lid. We will add our ice cube to the top of this here in hopes that this will work. So we'll let that sit here for about 20 seconds. I definitely waited longer than 20 seconds because I was kind of trying to explain everything that was going on. That also might have been part of the reason why things, I'm kind of hidden behind this ice cube right now, why things didn't maybe turn out as clear as they might have before, because I've done this a number of times in class and out of class, and the clouds were usually pretty easy for you to see come out of the top of this jar. So we'll give it just a little bit longer here, then I'm gonna take this off, quick add the air freshener, and then we'll try again. Okay. And actually, interestingly enough, I kind of felt the lid actually kind of want to push away there a little bit, so maybe holding down and keeping that seal is also important. But that's kind of the fun of science, right? Is you just gotta experiment and see what happens and if it works or not. So we will let this kind of form in there. It sure looks a little bit hazier than it did last time, so I'll try to keep my my green shirt behind here so that hopefully, if we're in focus here, you can see the cloud when it comes out. All right, take number 2. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. I don't know, the cloud is steaming out for me. It might be really hard for it to translate to the camera, which, whew. Side note, do not inhale if you use a, oh, man, if Hawaii smells like that, I've been to Hawaii and it did not smell like that. Just don't, if you use air freshener, make sure you're not smelling smelling your cloud. Yeah. So if you couldn't see it, it might be even more reason for you to give this a try at home. But this is just kind of a simple little fun thing, and I think kind of understanding why clouds form the way that they do is kind of a neat thing. So they either form because of two reasons. One, they form because of temperature, like we said, right? If water vapor heats up, and then as it goes higher up in the atmosphere, right, it doesn't hit a lid of ice, it just hits higher up in the atmosphere, and the higher you go, the colder it gets. So it eventually hits a point where it drops back down, and then as it drops back down, it warms up, and it continues that cycle over and over again. So the same type of thing is happening outside with the clouds, and then if that water vapor encounters dust and particles and things in the atmosphere, it's able to condense together as a cloud. So when you're flying an airplane above the clouds, you happen to be high enough where the air is cold, where the air is dropped down, those clouds can't form there, and you're actually above that level where they're dropping and falling and rising and completing that cycle. But it also tells us that there's a lot of stuff in the atmosphere, right? Because if you think about how many clouds there are all the time, dust and particles and things like that, it's kind of strange that there's as many clouds as there are. The other way that clouds can form is through pressure. And I'm not going to get into that because you can also form a cloud using pressure. If you've ever twisted up a plastic water bottle really, really tight with the cap on, and then you've launched the cap off, and then you squeeze it, and you can see all the cloudy like fog emerge from the water bottle. That's the same exact thing, except for rather than temperature changing, when pressure changes, when you're squeezing and twisting up that water ball and the air compresses, that can create water vapor to condense as well. So temperature can create condensation, but also pressure. So depending upon which one you do, you can form clouds in both ways. But yeah, that's the first one. I will be doing a couple more of these to kind of explain some common features outside. A little less goofy, a little more educational, but that's all I got for you today. 3, 2, 1.